Council for Adult Education. This is one in the series of online and offline engagement opportunities for our members and also other interested people, just to get together, learn and unlearn from each other, reflect on their context, and just inspire each other to sometimes do things differently. Before starting, I see that some of you already started presenting yourself, which is great. I just wanted to actually invite you to do the same. So in case you haven't, please feel free to write your full name, your organization, and maybe a place where you are writing from in the chat box. We have people from many different places. Our network is really comprises of people from all continents and world regions, and we really believe in really revolutionary power of these diverse thoughts that we gather. We have people from Pakistan, Germany, Ireland, the Philippines, Barcelona, Spain, United Kingdom, Jamaica. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Feel free to continue sharing. Maybe we can start by just giving a very brief and not very tedious presentation of who and what Bridge 47 is. My name is Alen Maletic, and together with my colleague Ricarda Mochilnik, we are a small but very committed Bridge 47 network team. Bridge 47 is a network and a project that was co-created and implemented by 15 European and global civil society organizations. And our network is really, we aim to really build it as a learning hub for people around the globe to get together and learn from each other on very different topics and issues related to transformative learning. Our mission is really to try to empower global civil society to contribute to transformation towards global justice through global citizenship education and other types of transformative education. What do we do? As I mentioned already, we coordinate a global network, so really promoting and supporting networking across geographic and other lines around transformative learning and education for active citizenship. We also advocate to change policies, so we want to see more policies that reflect the role of transformative learning in achieving sustainable development at global, European, as well as at national level. It's all interconnected, of course. And also we build new partnerships. We also try to find ways how to work in partnerships with organizations and different actors that haven't previously engaged with global citizenship education, and to bring the ideals and practices of global citizenship education to also new audiences. And finally, we also try to increase the capacity of civil society, which means that we also need to critically reflect on our own assumptions and also explore new ways of doing education in a more transformative and better way. Maybe you can see on the next slide a small overview of what Bridge 47 is. As you can see, we do a lot and it's all very much interconnected. So we, with our innovative and transformative educational practices, we try to push some boundaries of what we advocate for. We advocate for better, more transformative educational practice. We build partnerships with different actors and new audiences to also that can help us reflect on our work and that we can support each other. And of course, it is all supported through our network. It is all interconnected. So this is our plan for today. This online workshop was imagined as really one way to help us all reflect individually and collectively as a group on our experiences and observations in the last couple of quite intense months, where we experienced pain, paralysis on one hand, but also on the other hand, we have seen and felt a lot of hope and solidarity and creativity and kindness activities across the globe. And what does this all mean for our educational as well as activist work is something that we would like to together reflect on in this workshop. And finally, we also want to listen to the future and ourselves, what it is telling us. Is there a call for some change? Is it time to stay still, or is it time to act? And how to distinguish between the two. So we will start with two excellent speakers who will give us some food for thought, Shermaine, Barrett, and Timo Holtoff. And that will be followed by two exchanges in smaller groups of 4 to 5 people, with a break of 10 minutes in between. So 6:20, 6:45, 10-minute break, and then 16:55 to 17:25, another session. In the end, we will have an open dialogue where everyone will be able to share whatever they felt like, whatever they felt was powerful in the next 2 or 2.5 hours. And of course, we'll be happy to hear some feedback from you as well. But maybe before we dig into the whole program and before we start to work, maybe I would invite you to join us for a moment of mindfulness. We have here one beautiful virtual forest. I would invite you to take a moment, maybe a minute or so, of silence and contemplation. You can close your eyes, you can imagine yourself in a forest far, far away. You can observe your mind, your body, your heartbeat, your breath, and just try to relax and see what thoughts are emerging and what your questions might be. You can start now. Thank you. Thank you. May I slowly invite you to come back? Thank you very much. Okay, maybe we can start with Slido. I hope you have your smartphones ready. We have a very short starting poll. So if you can join at www.slido.com, the code is #W333. So 3 3s. Are you managing? Is it? Mm-hmm. So the first question is, describe your mood regarding the corona crisis in one word. Please use one word. You can write different words, but one word at a time, please. Uncertainty, patient, uncertain, limitation, anxious, wandering, patient, restlessness, fed up, softness, overwhelming, roller coaster. I see 27 replies. Surprised, anxious, burnout, resilience, hope, anxious. We see there is quite a lot of uncertainty and anxiety, but also resilience. Angry, paused. Thank you. A lot of very different feelings, and that is not surprising given the times we are in. Maybe we can continue with the next question. The corona crisis means more opportunities than challenges. 1, strongly disagree, 5, strongly agree. It's a rating. It seems we are quite in the middle, unsure. We neither agree or disagree. It seems that the middle is the strongest, slightly leaning towards 2. Okay, thank you, everyone. Maybe we can go to the next question. Describe your educational and activist work in the context of the corona situation. You can select multiple choices. So in pause mode, after the crisis, I guess we'll go back to business as usual. Keep it up, and now more than ever, the crisis confirms the importance of transformative education and the work we are doing. With many question marks, no idea what to do next, and we must really reinvent our work to respond to the crisis. There are many replies indicating the importance of transformative education. That's something that is really uniting us. But also there is quite a lot of replies that we need to really reinvent a lot the work that we are doing. Thank you, everyone. All right. This is a good start and a good temperature check how we feel. And the last one would be, what would be your most burning question? It is an open text regarding the role of transformative learning in this crisis. What is the first question that comes to your mind when it comes to the role of transformative learning in this whole situation? You can share also more questions if you feel like. How will recession affect our work? What's next? Digital gap, the social distance barrier. Will transformative learning still be in time to prevent the worst? How can we keep our well-being? How to mainstream spiritual growth? How do we build resilience? What can we do as educators? How will we manage to deal globally? How to reach the mainstream? Great. How is transformative learning feasible in the online context? How do we transform educational tools? How do we address authoritarian governments? How do we support disadvantaged learners? How do we reinforce resilience and empathy that are so much needed? How can we make sure that everybody has access to transformative learning? How to integrate technology? What about the No Child Left Behind principle in the midst of the pandemic? Great. There are really many quite big questions, which is a great and also very bold questions that need to be asked, and hopefully we will have a nice space to tackle some of those. Thank you very much for contributing in this first opening start exercise. Now we will have two great speakers. We won't be having immediately questions and answer sessions after the input, but feel free to use chat box in case you want to share some thoughts, something that sparks your attention in the presentation. Feel free to chat. At the end, in the last session, where we'll have an open dialogue and where we will all be able to talk to each other, we will also have space to talk to speakers if you wish. But without further ado, I will present Dr. Shermaine A. Barrett, who is a professor of adult education and workforce development at the University of Technology in Jamaica, where she's currently Dean of the Faculty of Education and Liberal Studies. She's also the Vice President of the International Council for Adult Education. Her research interests include adult teaching and learning, workforce education, and teacher professional development. Shermaine, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Ellen. Ricardo, yes, thank you. So, good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to engage in this process of reflection on the experience of COVID-19. Cole and Misero argue that we can only learn from our experiences when we take the time to reflect on them. And so this is a very important exercise in which we are engaged today, and I'm very pleased to be a part of it. This workshop, and consequently my presentation, is taking place under the auspices of global citizenship education. So I'd like to begin by highlighting some of the key ideas or values promoted by global citizenship. And these are, next slide, please. Interconnectedness and interdependence, a sense of belonging to a broader community and common humanity, a sense of responsibility to others, awareness and action consistent with a broad understanding of humanity, the planet, and the impact of our decisions on both. It speaks to challenging growing inequalities and the need to promote social justice, ethical behavior, and fairness in our responses. These ideas promote the base on which I'd like to ground how I'd like to frame the lessons from COVID-19 and how it informs the narrative for the global citizenship education agenda. And so I'd like to look at three broad categories of issues that I'd like to pull out. And the first one is housed in what I call the social or socio-emotional perspective. And it looks specifically at individualism versus collectivism. Next slide, please. So key to the notion of global citizenship is the value of interconnectedness and interdependence, and a sense of shared responsibility as noted before. But I believe these are the values that were challenged throughout the COVID-19 experience. You see, beating the virus called for collective action, such as wearing a mask, observing social distance, staying at home, and avoiding public gatherings, not only to protect oneself, but to protect family members and members of the wider community. But all across the world, we saw and heard how people were struggling with the idea of being told what to do on the one hand, and on the other hand, being deprived of their individual freedom to do what they wanted to do when they wanted to do so. What this points to, from my perspective, is a struggle with the I versus the we, the individual versus the collective, and individualism versus collectivism. These concepts were that threatened our independence and our interdependence and a sense of responsibility to each other. There are numerous reports of individuals in wealthy countries hoarding essential items such as masks and hand sanitizers for resale, while others were suffering for lack of those same items. And on a more national scale, there were even situations of the redirecting of items such as ventilators meant for other countries. And these were considered critical for patient care. So we are being challenged into new ways of understanding self in relation to others. That stood out as one of the major challenges and one of the ways in which the COVID-19 experience challenged us to look at self and to reevaluate our ways of being and our ways of thinking. Next slide. The next set of ideas I'd like to put forward, I'd like to house them within the economic perspective, looking specifically at the organization of work and the issue of sustainable livelihoods. So only recently, I started giving attention to the notion of the gig economy, otherwise referred to as platform work or crowd work. I was fascinated by the term and its implication for workforce education in which I'm involved. But the global pandemic brought into sharp focus for me some of the challenges that are embedded within the structure of work as represented within the context of the gig economy. According to the International Labour Organization, these forms of work imply a break from the traditional employment relations based on a long-term link between employer and worker, and thus the prospect of a lifetime of stable work and income. The organization of work within the gig economy, therefore, to my mind, renders workers vulnerable to income and job losses in times of crisis like we are currently experiencing. In the gig economy, where workers are often classified as self-employed, the workers must take care of many arrangements and costs that in standard employment would be based and be borne by the employer. And these include social security and pension contributions, workspaces and working equipment, sick leave and annual leave, and others. Next slide. According to the president of the Caribbean Congress of Workers, Andre Lewis, contract workers were the most displaced with the closure of businesses during the pandemic. And this is a fact that has been highlighted and verified by the International Labour Organization. And so given the nature of the contracts that these individuals would have signed, there would be no obligation on the part of the employer for these displaced workers. And this exposes the vulnerability and inequality among workers. But as Wayne Chen, president of the Caribbean Employers Confederation, noted, The economy is not just about a bunch of numbers. It is the job and the people working in the business. So if we look at this situation from the principle of social economic justice, the practice within the gig economy, for me, falls short. If we go back to the original understanding of social justice, which was grounded in an economic perspective during the Industrial Revolution and the subsequent civil revolution throughout Europe in the 19th century, what we would see is that the objective of social justice was to create a fair and equal society in which each individual matters. Their rights are recognized and protected, and decisions are made in ways that are fair and honest. And so this raises questions about the protection of workers within the global space. The conversation, therefore, must address the protection of incomes and jobs and promote work. This is important as we discuss global citizenship, because the livelihoods of people affect their well-being and their sense of humanity. And I'd like to caution us that work structures, though they may be legal, may not be fair and just. And the third perspective I'd like to share with us is housed within the social perspective. Next slide, Ricardo. And so I'd like to look specifically at the digital divide and parental readiness to assist their children with learning. So one of the major impacts of the COVID-19 is the closing of schools across the globe. According to UNESCO, 1.5 billion students were sent home. So students and teachers were forced to continue their engagement through online modalities. At the same time, parents were being called upon to supervise the learning of their children at home. This situation exposed many challenges that exist in terms of student readiness for learning. Many parents were not equipped to assist their children for several reasons. But the one I'd like to highlight here is where there was the inability of some parents to read and understand the work of their children, pointing to the need for continued attention to adult literacy. It shows the interconnection between adult learning and students' learning outcomes, highlighting the intergenerational connection of learning. So parents continue to be essential in creating a foundation for children's learning experiences. And according to a study conducted by the National Center for Education Statistics, children with a richer home literacy environment displayed higher levels of reading, knowledge, and skills than their counterparts with less rich home literacy environments. But another issue that was highlighted, and one that is of major concern to me within the digital age, and more so as we gallop into the fifth industrial revolution, is the very significant digital divide that exists in our countries. This is a well-known but often not discussed matter. So millions of students were disenfranchised by the virtual learning response of COVID-19 because of a lack of access to the internet. And again, there were several reasons for this. For some, it was simply the inability to afford the commodity, the hardware and the software. For others, it was a lack of access due to lack of connectivity, and still for others, it was intermittent connectivity resulting from weak technological infrastructure within various countries. Looking through the lens of social justice and human rights, this situation speaks to the inequality of opportunities to a basic right. the right of quality education. The existing digital divide challenges the creation of an equitable and inclusive learning opportunities for all students in the digital age. This is an issue that must be part of the post-COVID narrative, as many decision makers across the globe are speaking of technology being a permanent and growing part of education. And so here are my concluding points. As we move toward the post-COVID-19 era, transformative education challenges us to question our positions, our positionality, our values, and the ways in which we need to change and grow and develop. We are challenged to find ways to promote collectivism and a sense of responsibility to others over individualism, while maintaining our personal confidence and autonomy. This is important because collective action is fundamental to any effort towards sustainability. The conversation about social justice must permeate every sector of society, and importantly, in the conversations and decisions around decent work. So big on the agenda of sustainable development and the sustainable development goals is the need to ensure equitable and inclusive education for all. And so as we move into the post-COVID era in education, this must inform our decisions. I would like to end this presentation with a question. How can we as global citizens take thoughtful, informed, and responsible action to bring about change in the areas highlighted in this presentation? I hope together we will find the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Shermaine. Thank you very much for this really interesting take on some of the implications for our societies, economies, and social justice in these very, very strange times. I can only share the hope that we will maybe find some answers, or at least make our questions more precise and better in terms of what we are asking. Our next speaker is Timo Holthoff. He's our colleague in Bridge 47. He's based at our German partner organization, VENRO, which is an umbrella of German development NGOs, and he coordinates the team for innovation and capacity building in Bridge 47. He has worked for NGOs in the field of global education for the past 10 years, and he's also a freelance trainer and author on decolonial and transformative learning and unlearning. Timo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ellen, and especially thank you very much, Shermaine. That was very insightful. Yeah, I'm calling you from my home in Hanover today, from my bedroom, to be precise and honest. I'm very honored to be in this space with all of you and to share my thoughts. Before I do that, I would actually like to invite you to a very small exercise to get ready and refreshed for what is to come. So can I ask you to just rub your hands together very closely and quickly and feel the warmth that is building up between your hands, a little more and faster, and then put them on your eyes. And maybe we can see the warmth and energy that we are feeling as the warmth and energy of being together in this space today. Thank you very much. Just looking for the remote control of the slide. There it is. Well, I would say that the last couple of months certainly were an intensified life experience, probably for all of us. And life currently is a learning event even more than it usually is. And I have lived through it with anxiety, but also with a sense of curiosity of what is unfolding around us and also among us and inside of us. And what this is calling us for as humans, but also as educators. To be honest, I'm still really struggling with getting my head around all of this, as it's quite overwhelming. So what follows is just my humble and subjective attempt to start a conversation about the bigger picture. There is a slide missing here. Or is it? Oh, sorry, it was just in the wrong order. Yeah, so what indeed popped up the most in our little poll earlier was the sensation of uncertainty. And I also feel that across the many aspects of the crisis we are currently experiencing, a degree of uncertainty that is unknown to most of us. There is this sense of lacking a map or maybe even a compass for navigating in the crisis. And this causes a lot of uneasiness, I think, because it stands in very stark contrast to, well, the paradigm of modernity, of the constant explainability, predictability, and linearity of things. And our need to control everything at all times and to be a master of the future. And our modern systems are actually built for that. And they are failing us right now in yet unknown ways, while they have already failed us before. And we, if we call us modern subject, might not be equipped to deal generatively with this uncertainty, but maybe rather resort to panic reactions. What helps me personally is to remind myself of the famous saying of Bayo Akomolafe, which is, the times are urgent, we have to slow down. What might sound paradoxical is actually an invitation to take a step back, to pause, and to look at the bigger picture, especially in times of crisis and in turmoil, which I guess might be a counterintuitive thing to do. So I don't find that very easy, to be honest. And what Bayo says is also an invitation to acknowledge that we simply do not have all the answers and that there are no quick fixes to complex and big problems. And also that simple answers are very prone just to reproduce the very root causes that have created the problem in the first place. So actually Bayo is calling this Corona situation disruption that we needed to go deeper to the hard and painful questions that have remained mostly unasked or unheard by the majority for so long. Before I go further down that road, I want to actually say very clearly that there is nothing romantic about the Corona crisis. So people are dying, people lose their existence, and in a world of inequality, people are very unequally affected by the crisis, as Shermaine also pointed to, actually along the same centuries-old long lines of inequality and separation. So especially speaking from a position of privileged health and safety, I will not turn in with voices saying things like, well, finally Mother Nature is striking back and teaching us a lesson, and the pandemic is a blessing. However, at the same time, I think while we are mindful and acknowledge the acute suffering and the growing inequalities of the crisis, and think about urgent actions that are needed before that background, I think the crisis also should not paralyze us emotionally and intellectually to see it also as a unique chance for learning and possibly as an opening for changes that we have been struggling for so long. By now, when we say Corona crisis, it is very obvious that the crisis goes far beyond the actual pandemic, and not only in the sense that the lockdown measures to contain the pandemic have direct social and economic side effects, which probably all of us feel, but also in the sense that crises in one system are cascading and plunging over, and plunging other systems into crisis as well, so that we are probably building up to a global economic and financial crisis with enormous social consequences and political turmoils. And this most certainly develops its own dynamic and does not simply disappear as the pandemic at some point will disappear. So I think what we witness, and many people say that, is at least a climax of the crisis of globalized capitalism and the modern nation state as its guardian. Some go as far as saying that we are seeing a cultural and spiritual crisis of our model of civilization, like US cultural philosopher Charles Eisenstein, who sees Corona as a trigger effect for a collapse that was long in the making, even overdue, and that humanity is at the point to reinvent itself after the project of modernity has finally failed. This sounds like apocalypse a little bit, and I admit that the visual language here underlines this, but it might also steer hope. Because I'm wondering, is the normal we knew before Corona the state to which we want to return? I think our pre-Corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized the destruction of nature, the exploitation of people, and that profit maximization and growth take precedence over the common good. And on a deeper level, modernity normalizes separation from each other and from nature and Mother Earth. And I think the Corona pandemic only illustrates and exacerbates these pre-existing problems and injustices. That people now die of hunger caused by this crisis is not the cause of the virus, but of a system that has built inequality over centuries. So there is really nothing fateful about the crisis, even though popular discourse sometimes tries to suggest it's like the evil virus hitting us from behind. We could actually have seen this coming in its historic and systemic genesis. So if we only react by killing the virus, I think we make it a scapegoat for what is actually very wrong with our system on a root cause level. And I hope what is unfolding is shaking us enough to get to the many elephants in the room, so to say. And there is some indication for hope if we look at history. So history teaches us that actually existential crises like pandemics, wars, natural disasters, world economic crisis have been the strongest catalysts for profound change and also for very rapid changes. What we can observe in times of crisis is that ideas that were until just before dismissed as completely utopian or even oppressed and fought against are suddenly conceived as possible or even as necessary and are also implemented. So if we think about what is actually a system and what makes change so difficult, is that a system has a lot of past dependencies, process change, routines, and underlying social norms. That is our hamster wheel, so to say, in which we are stuck. And what happens when the system becomes dysfunctional in a crisis, and that is what we are witnessing right now to some degree, is that the mass inertia of the system is dissolved. It becomes more fluid. And this creates cracks for very different things to emerge. And normality in that situation might be renegotiated. in relation to the very individual, but also to the collective horizons of imagination. And this then also potentially expand the scope for political action and thus creates a large window of opportunity for transformation. Something that is very particular about this crisis is its simultaneousness. More or less all people worldwide feel acutely and tangibly affected. Someone moved my slide. Let's go back. Oh, that's a spoiler. Sorry for that. And one more back. Okay. Well, these are the smaller challenges we have to deal with. Okay. I hope it. No? So what I was saying is that the singularity in history right now is that more or less all people worldwide feel acutely and tangibly affected by this potentially existential crisis. So unprecedented, we have this moment of joint attention globally. I'm very mindful that large parts of humanity have been threatened by existential crisis for centuries, but other parts, especially those responsible for these crises, have looked the other way. And this time, in this crisis, so to speak, nobody can look away. Everybody has to act, or at least react. And in this sense, some call the crisis a global stress test, which will undeniably reveal the failures of the system of modern civilization that we built. Indian writer Arundhati Roy sees the pandemic as a global wake-up call and calls it a gateway between one world and the next. She hoped that the world will learn from Corona and follow a different logic in the future, so that other crises like climate change or inequality will be approached with the same consistency. However, what we also learn from history is that a positive direction of change from crisis is by no means predetermined, and of course also not in agreement what a positive direction might be in the first place. Naomi Klein has pointed out in her very insightful work, The Shock Doctrine, that authoritarian governments and economic elites have often taken advantage of states of public disorientation to restrict democratic rights or push through liberal economic reforms under the banner of inevitability. And also that measures that were announced as temporary often outlasted the circumstances that brought them about. But Klein also provides examples of social achievements that were realized in the wake of crisis and have had a positive impact for decades. And indeed, what I see around us is a big ambiguity of reactions to the crisis. On the one hand, very scary and bad things, and on the other hand, very beautiful things on an individual level and also on a societal scale. We see egoism, renationalization, and in some countries, social and political repression, but we also see planes coming down from the skies clearing up, universal basic income being introduced in a country, mummies and daddies spending more time with their children, many new forms of solidarity and kindness and community building despite social distancing. And if one looks at the whole thing analytically from the perspective of transformation theories, one could say we are currently experiencing a great deal of pattern breaks with the old system and accustomed behaviors, and also a great deal of emergence of alternative ways and behaviors. And both are actually seen as very essential elements of transformation. Again, one slide too fast. Well, the hope I spoke of for sure will not materialize if people don't act upon it. How this will play out has to be negotiated through action. We cannot just sleep through the crisis and hope to wake up to a better world. And it's also obvious that not only progressive civil society, but also right-wing apologists or the beneficiaries of the status ante are already trying to exploit the crisis for their own ends. So as citizens and as civil society, we must therefore be very vigilant right now. What do we want to preserve? What do we have to fight for politically so that it does not happen or that it disappears again? And what is also the positive vision that we want to foster? And of course, who's left behind, whose voices and ideas are heard and not heard, and who needs solidarity most. One side note, despite the struggle with politics and businesses that is common to us as civil society, I think we really should try to avoid classic we against them dichotomies. Because it is clear that we too are all part of the system and all part of the problem. And, but at the same time, we are also all part of the solution. And I think our message has to be one of love that reconnects and does not divide us further. And especially for us educators, I think apart from calling out the failures of the system, which are now illustrated by Corona, I see a call to nourish the many positive learnings and seeds of change, to promote social alternatives, to make them visible, to encourage people to dream of another world and participate in its creation, to take away a fear of change, to build stamina for change, to offer collective orientation and perspectives for actions, and to use the activation, mobilization of so many people through the crisis as a moment for old and for new social movement. I think it starts with a simple question of...
Timo, sorry for interrupting. We're just a little bit behind the schedule.
Yeah, I'm already shortening. So I think it starts with, I only will take 2 minutes, if that's okay, just to wrap it up. So it starts with the question of how we actually talk about Corona and the crisis. Which narratives do we use? It's clear that Corona will inscribe itself deeply into the collective memory. And I'm wondering, can we make sure that it does so not only as trauma, but potentially also as a globally shared frame of reference, what we can create and recreate if we tackle it all together. And perhaps there is a chance to transfer this momentum of this joint attention of Corona to other crises as well. And okay. So my questions as an educational activist is, what is our contribution to coping with the crisis in the short term and to learning from the crisis in the medium term? I'm very aware that even without educational programs, a great deal is experienced and learned and unlearned right now in a very accelerated fashion. The crisis is an educational situation. So I'm wondering, what do people need right now? Which collective spaces of reflection, support and empowerment can and should education offer in order to accompany and link individual learning processes with a bigger picture and change? What can be our contribution to society's ability to heal its wounds, both those from the crisis and those who become more visible through the crisis? I said initially that it's very hard to get our head around this complex mess, but I think it might be easier to get our heart around this complex mess. And as I learned from Dani D'Emilia and Vanessa Andriotti, an individual heart can never deal with collective pain. So I think what we are called to right now is to collectivize our hearts, and doing that also through education. So I hope this is not the end of the world, for sure, but maybe it's the end of the world as we knew it. Thank you, and sorry for taking more time and the technical confusion.
Thank you, Timo. Thank you so much. Thank you for reminding us that when discussing the crisis and the current challenges, also that we do not take the existing system for granted. It was also at some point and throughout time constructed, and it can be equally deconstructed and turned into something else. And we should be bold and brave when discussing solutions. Thank you to both speakers for great inputs. Hopefully they provided some inspiration and initiated some thinking processes that will now translate into work of the breakout sessions. In the next round, we will have 20 minutes discussions in small groups of 4 people. In each breakout room, you will be invited to appoint a facilitator just to make sure there are no awkward silences. And we count on you to help us with your goodwill and to help us create nice, safe, inclusive spaces where everyone will feel encouraged to contribute and to share their ideas and thoughts. There will be a Padlet, an online tool where you will be able to post a virtual post-it. My colleague Ricarda will explain a little bit later how it is done. So you will be able to, at the end of the discussion, in the last 5 minutes, we will remind you that the time is running out, and you will be invited just to make sure that you have a couple of great ideas that you had in the group, or the main worries, or the main suggestions, main concerns, whatever you feel like you want to share as a group, you can share in one post-it all together. We prepared some guiding questions that you can use to phrase your discussions. So you can start by doing a short introduction of yourselves, and at the same time just resonate with the impulses that were now given. What reactions does the crisis invoke on you? What do you experience? What makes you hopeful? What frightens you? How does it affect you most? And secondly, what kind of learning and what kind of other support do all the very different people around the world need right now? How can education, and by education I have to emphasize, when we say education, we really mean education in a very broad sense. So we don't think only about schools, which are of course important, but also learning in everyday life, learning at workplace, learning with civil society organizations, learning in your families, learning in museums, in libraries. So really, when you're thinking about education, think really broad. How can learning and education contribute to learning from the crisis in the medium term? And what are the first kind of concrete answers and approaches for your educational as well as activist work that you do? So this would be some kind of more general questions that you can use. Of course, feel free to go in the whatever kind of direction you feel like in the moment, and we hope to have creative and nice discussions. That would be it. Ricarda, would you like to just show the Padlet?
Give me 1 second. I have to
okay.
Change my different screens here. In the meantime, I invite participants to copy the questions so that you have them for the breakout rooms. And
please copy your questions, or you can take print screen of the questions, just
yes,
or
so
whatever is easiest.
For people that haven't seen a Padlet yet, it's pretty easy. You see it's empty now, and I hope you're going to be filling it with loads of post-its very soon. So very easy. Each group, please post one sticky note up there by clicking on this pink button here where it says create, and then there a new post-it or sticky note pops up, and you can add a title if you like. So what we want to say, and then in the text you can include what you want to share from your group. That's essentially it. That's how the Padlet works. So if this is okay for you, and if you have all copied the questions, and please also, I am copying the link of the Padlet again here in the chat box. So we are sending you now to your breakout sessions. So I'll see you back in 25 minutes, and afterwards we will have a well-deserved break. Thank you so much.
Okay, and before before
people are leaving already.
Oh. All? Yes? Okay, great. Welcome back. Hope you had nice, thought-provoking discussions, and that you got some inspiration and hope. I had a chance to look at the Padlet and see the richness of ideas that came out, and I would invite you to just quickly have a look together at it. You can see it in the Zoom, but also you can open it in another tab if you can't see well the letters. They are quite small, depending on your screen. So either way. Some of the things that I saw that I saw really interesting. People were discussing about what the new normal holds in the future for the different sectors and how they will look like in the next phase. What are the new ways of togetherness and critical thinking? People have been discussing how never before, how clear it was how everything is interconnected today, and that might give some hope. How do we operate within existing spheres, like when it comes to research, education, and other sectors? Like what different implication it has. Of course, the importance of humanistic education in all its forms, so not only formal, also informal and non-formal, was raised. So really how we work transnationally, across countries, across regions, and bringing together different forms and practices and traditions of learning and education to help create this kind of new narrative. People were also discussing technological and digital divide, and as one of the very visible inequalities that we can observe in the context of the crisis. And I also saw some really nice quotes about resilience and hope. Resilience is important for dealing with the pandemic, and the basis for resilience is hope. which I find really, really nice. But maybe I would invite our speakers to maybe share a few thoughts if they have before opening the floor to everyone to share their aha moments or some great ideas that they had or some new things that emerged in the process and so on. Okay, maybe Shermaine, would you like to comment on what we have?
Yes, thank you, Alan. I want to start my comments by picking up on some of the things that I heard in Timo's presentation that I thought were very useful, and I want to keep them in the fore of our minds. So I like the fact that he spoke about modern systems tend to be, within modern systems, we are in control, and that the coronavirus challenged that control. And I heard that right across the sectors, particularly in the health sector, where we have studied and we have gone through Ebola and we did all these things and we think we had things under control. And here is something that just hit that out of our hands. In my own country, we had just presented our new financial budget. It was the opening of the financial budget, and it was beautiful. And that was just hit out, just like that. All our projections were changed. And so it is it's a time of uncertainty. And another thing that Timo said that I found very, very interesting is that we should not use the virus as a scapegoat for those things that were already wrong in the society. And so that challenges us to be able to look beyond or, as was said in my group, facing the facts, acceptance of that we are out of control, acceptance of the fear, and then begin to make efforts towards hope. And that hope will open the door for resilience, because I hear my own students talking about people are fearful they won't be able to finish their studies. People are fearful because they don't have the funds or they can't access the learning. So there's a lot of fear. And so one of the things that I'm taking away from our discussion is this notion of hope being the basis to move forward into resilience, which may mean learning new skills, new knowledge, new competencies. And so it's going to take some new kinds of commitment. So those are some of the things that I'm reflecting on. Thank you.
Thank you, Shermaine. Thank you so much. Maybe I would open the floor to everyone else who would like to share something from their groups or something individual. It can be either collective work or individual thoughts or whatever you might have. Either in the chat box, you can write it down. If you wish, you can also raise hand, and you can also join us with audio and just speak as well, whatever you prefer. So any aha moments you had, ideas, concerns, anything you would like to share with the rest of us? Anyone? You can write in the chat box or you can raise a hand and speak.
Hello, Ellen. This is Mahmoud once again.
Okay.
Sorry.
Mahmoud, please.
So Mahmoud from Bangladesh. What I have seen actually, even today's workshop is new for me, the shape or design of this workshop. So I understand that this is the evolving things from the COVID situation. Now we are in a workshop. We are switching to groups from the panel discussions or yeah. So these are no new things. So a lot of opportunities definitely will evolve from the pandemic. And perhaps what I understand, what I guess actually, perhaps new normal situation that we are expecting we cannot expect even what we cannot actually understand now what might it look like. Because the pandemic in 1918 that has resulted lot of 1818 actually, 1818 actually, so far. That has resulted in a lot of devastation things, including collapse of a lot of regimes. So there are many things might happen in the world. So to education also. But I understand from this pandemic, these are evolving, especially technology is taking over the normal class. I am worrying actually about the presence of teachers in future. That is my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark has raised his hand as well. Mark, please switch on.
Hi there, I'm Mark from Glasgow. I think one of our other participants, Karen Pashby, I think has the work that she's been doing with Vanessa Androtti around beyond reform, global citizenship education is absolutely crucial. For me, the questions we are all discussing come down to political questions and concepts of political literacy, an understanding of how education is a tool of power, and this concept of education in any way being neutral is an absolute falsehood and a myth. And what in countries like Scotland, where I am, we have to be activists working to address the colonial mindsets that still are there, where countries like the UK still are stripping resources away from other countries in the world. And we can't separate global citizenship education from social and environmental justice. So for me, there's still elements of the global citizenship education which is influenced by enterprise and this idea of skills for work and globalization of the job market, and these are myths and damaging ideologies which COVID has just shone a light on. If people didn't see it before, the catastrophic level of impact that has happened. And sadly, if it takes involving, we've had Ebola, and often these terrible impacts have not been global, so they have been allowed to be sort of sidelined because they're happening somewhere else. Now it's happening everywhere, and perhaps we're seeing with the Black Lives Matter protests. There was a big protest in Glasgow on Sunday, thousands of people there, and people are connecting the dots of these levels of inequality and injustice. And I just want that train to keep rolling. And I think global citizenship education has to get on it, if it's not on it already, and start to be an energetic part of that movement.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. We have another. We have a question from Katarina Popovic, also, who wrote a couple of extra questions to think about the importance of emotional learning and how do we hold emotional spaces, and for the experiences really in the context of global citizenship education. How can we find a more holistic perspective when imagining new things and envisioning the new normal, among other things?
Yeah. Thank you, Alan. I hope you wouldn't mind if I choose another question out of the few things that I wanted to ask. So if I change,
of course.
My focus of interest was changing, of course, during the session. There were so many inspiring discussions, and based on the exchange that we had in our group, and of course related to the presentations, I would go back to another one, although this emotion question is very, very important. So what I would like to ask both of our presenters, their opinion on this invitation to behave responsibly, to stay home, to make social and physical distances and things like this. I feel like it sounds a bit cynical in the global context, maybe not in Europe, but we are in a session of global citizenship education, and that's why we have to take global context into account. So does it sound a bit cynical when we know that around the globe, many people cannot afford to work elegantly a computer? They have to go out to risk their lives. They are deprived of learning. They cannot make social distances because of the way and circumstances they live in. So is it a kind of a invitation that speaks to the responsibility feeling people have, but at the same time a bit cynical and luxurious? So I would like to hear both speakers' opinion on that.
Thank you, Katarina. I will just read another question that was written in the chat box, and then I can pass the word to the presenters. Naomi Gichuru, sorry if I'm mispronouncing in advance, asks how can we make sure that we are prepared for future uncertainties in terms of keeping students ready to engage online where possible and keeping high hopes. So in the context of not knowing whether the normal will be back and when, something else might happen. How do we start preparations for such context and making sure that learning continues despite the hardships? Thank you, Naomi. We can go back to Katarina's question as well as Naomi. Maybe I can pass the word to Timo now.
Thank you, Ellen. And Katarina, you're putting me on the spot with that question. But I actually think you have already answered or given one possible answer to the question yourself, which I even don't have to add so much to. But what I would like to underline indeed is that even though we are very much connected in this current crisis, maybe even more than before, or at least more tangibly than before for many people, we still, as you pointed out, make very different experiences in the crisis. And we also have very different interpretations of what is actually happening, what is behind the crisis. So I think what is happening right now, and that is also certainly a challenge to education and to GCE, is that our conceptions of reality might be drifting even further apart than they have been before. So I think a call for education in that context, both in a national context, but then also whenever we have the chance in a transnational context, is that we create dialogue spaces where we really just focus on speaking from the heart, listening to each other with mindfulness without judging, trying to learn from each other and trying to build relations of trust. And I think in that sense, many things that you have shared in the Padlet also resonated a lot with me. There were things about, well, maybe in these times, well, probably before, but now it's becoming more obvious, education doesn't have to be about bringing so much content and information to the room, but just working with the experiences that people bring to the table, and trying to hold a space where also emotional experiences can be shared, and where, if not a safe space, we at least have a brave space to encounter difficult questions with each other, even if it's painful, and to have a focus more on affective and relational learning than on cognitive learning or rational learning, I would say. And what also resonated in that context was the saying that how can we see educational spaces as spaces also to deal with and to heal trauma, and ideally to transform this trauma and this frustration and these hard experiences into something more generative that we can use to co-create a different reality. And I'm very, last thing I would like to share, I'm very grateful, Mark, for what you said also about seeing not the lack of education as the problem, but education itself, well, mainstream formal education, as it is instrumental to a larger socioeconomic system, and it in the kind of knowledge and relations it's based on is reproducing hegemonic thinking and structures all the time, and that education maybe is more about critical literacy of understanding of how can we deal with the kind of, well, infos and perceptions of reality that we have. And you refer to Karen Pashby and to Vanessa Andriotti and that collective, and I just what I had thought of when I was reading some of the comments was this idea about transformative learning that I also picked up from Vanessa Andriotti, which is that it should be about hospicing a dying system without trying to kill it, and at the same time trying to midwife something new that wants to emerge. So creating and holding space and caring for that. So it's a call actually, despite all the terrible things that are happening, to be gentle with ourselves and with each other.
Thank you, Timo. There is one more raised hand.
Sherratt, do you have raised your hand? A Sherratt? Oh no, maybe it was a mistake. Okay.
No, it's not.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
We can hear you.
Yes. How nice going with my name. My name is Fahad, which is Hani in Arabic. Lovely meeting all of you today. If I may add, it's quite important to remember that unity is strength. And like any other field, education, if we can all unite together to exchange experiments and education system, I think we all would benefit from that. For example, I'm talking to you guys today from Iraq, and I don't know if you know, the country had been in trouble for a while, and COVID-19 was not very kind to us. The education is on hold. We're trying to give some education quality for our students using online, and I must say we don't have a lot of experiments and experience in that field. I would love it if we had other countries who successfully build up good online education systems to help their students and maybe help us help ours. And yeah, that's about it.
Thank you so much. And we are slowly running out of time. There are a few more very interesting remarks in the chat box. But Shermaine, would you have any last words to share with us?
I just wanted to, there's one thing that is resonating in my mind as I thought about Katerina's question. And because when she asked the question, it reminded me of an experience. I am situated in one of the cities in Jamaica, but I had reason to go to one of the rural towns. And indeed, it was amazing that these people were not able to participate in the social distancing. Just their context did not allow it. And I said to one of my sisters, this is like two different worlds, in the city and in the rural area. And so, yes, I'm not even, I don't know if I'd call it cynicism. It just shows the limitations of man and mankind. And we can do our best within the context. And within that doing our best, we should share the responsibility. And so that's how I'd like to wrap my comments.
Yes, thanks, Shermaine. An important addition.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think these are really good closing words to the discussion. I know probably many people would have to add a lot of things. It's a really it's a big and rich conversation, but unfortunately, we will need to wrap up. There are so many great ideas that emerged and many bold ideas, and people might be calling them marginal or radical or something else, but where else do we draw hope when the mainstream is collapsing in so many ways? All right, before leaving, I would just invite you to go once more to Slido. There are only a few questions that we'd like to ask once again. So slido.com, and the code is W333. Corona crisis means more opportunities than challenges. We are curious to see whether we have similar kind of views or slightly different than before, or if anything has changed. Okay, 3s, 4s. Some 2s, many 4s. We have 18 votes. Has everyone managed to access the... I think we have a few more people to maybe vote, or... Okay. We see quite an increase in hope, it seems, from the start, which is really great to see. Although I would say this question is also a little bit maybe a trick question, because challenges are opportunities in themselves as well. Okay, thank you. The next question, I found we would like to hear your feedback, whether you liked the workshop, whether you gained some inspiration. We would be really happy to hear your thoughts. Okay. Thank you very much. We are happy to see many 5s and 4s. And also happy to learn in the open feedback as the next question. If you have any suggestions or anything you want to share with us for the future, or feel free to share your thoughts. Thank you. It is necessary, another one. Political literacy in GC webinar, more this kind of workshops, tighter topical focus, maybe, great speakers, hope. I feel the same. Very informative and interactive. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. There will be also a feedback sent to you in the follow-up email, so you will be able to, everyone else will also be able to share more in detail if they would like to. Before we wrap up, I would really like to use the opportunity to invite you to join the Bridge 47 network. We are now almost 800 people from around the world working on transformative learning, and you can join us very easily in just 2-3 minutes on our website, www.bridge47.org join. And in that way, you can also stay in the loop with the next workshops, webinars, activities we will be organizing in the future. And you can also follow us on the social media. The thing we would like to leave you with before leaving, we would like you to send a letter to yourself in 1 year time. So you can reflect individually on your experience in this, on the conversations that you had in this workshop, and just write a simple email. There is this website, it's www.futureme.org/letter/new. And there you can send a letter to yourself that will be sent to you in the period that you choose. It's set to 1 year. We suggest doing it in 1 year time. So what do you hope that will happen, since we kind of have the hope as the key words maybe of this workshop? And what do you hope for the world to happen in 1 year time? And what would you like to see more of or less? We leave you to take your time and do it at the time you wish. Thank you so much for participating in the workshop and for sharing your passions and intuition and your concerns and all the other very diverse feelings that we all feel right now. We are really thankful for your participation.
Thanks, Alan and Ricarda, and thanks to the speakers. It was a pleasure to chat with all of you.
So much. It was my pleasure to be involved and to contribute. Thank you, Katerina. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Timo.
Bye-bye.
Alan.
Thank you.
There seem to be still a few people here, but I can't Maybe they are not here really. Maybe it just looks like it.
They're writing their letters.
Ah, great. So now it's only us. Ah, no. One more person. Jesus, we almost did it on a minute.